It's not live.
It's going. I see the live. We're 1, 2, 3. All right.
Still says scheduled. Are you sure?
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 11 of the Justin and
Caitlin show. Woo!
Hey, coming to you live, quite honestly, from our own homes. But
hey, it says live now.
Yeah, no, we've been live. We're good. Man, just be aware, everybody, that there's a lot of storms rolling around Central Florida. So if this gets cut off somehow, we will come back on sometime tonight or whatever. But let's roll through.
Do it.
Tonight is on Ambivalent Attachment Style, and just as an early warning, for those of you who are parents, these episodes are likely going to be what I call double whammy, because you may connect to whatever attachment style, but then you may realize, oh man, I'm passing this on down to little Johnny, little Sally, whatever. Just be aware that is a dynamic that occurs. Caitlin, why don't you explain what attachment style is and kind of give us a slight recap of episode 1.
So attachment is how we connect to people, places, things, work, everything. And the reason we're going into this again is because attachment, how we attach to other people, forms by ages 3 or 4. And it plays into our entire life. And so ideally, we want to have secure attachment. And if you're curious about that, feel free to watch our video from last week where we dive into all of this. So tonight, we're going to start off with the first one of the insecure attachment forms, which is ambivalent. So for diving into ambivalence, go ahead.
I was just kind of giving Caitlin a little bit of a hard time before we started because she wanted to recap first episode. I didn't, but
thought it would be helpful.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you for validating. Yeah, in my opinion.
There you go. But I also wanted to say real quick before we get jumping that the ambivalent attachment style is the most common of them all that we see as therapists, at least nowadays. I also want people to just have a realistic expectation of tonight. We got like a little less than 30 minutes. This is not going to be an exhaustive all-end-all on this attachment style. There's literally books written like yay thick on this. So we're trying to give you the meat and potatoes, things you could take home and deal with, and then come to therapy and we can dive into it in a lot more detail. Yeah. But yeah, as of that, Caitlin, why don't you jump us into what are the basic beliefs and what is the core fear that people with this attachment style deal with?
Yeah. So from last week, we talked about the 2 basic attachment questions. 1, am I worthy of love? And 2, do I trust others to love me or just love in general? So for people with ambivalent attachment style, the answer to number 1 is no. They do not believe they are worthy of love. They believe inherently something's wrong with them. They are flawed in some way. They're not good enough in some way. And so when they enter into relationships, this is the belief they're going in with. They are not worthy of love. The second question of, do they trust others to love them? They trust others to love, but maybe not them. Because again, they don't believe that they're worth it. But they do trust that other people can have committed relationships, they can have a great marriage, they can have a great life. It just may not happen for them. And so knowing this, the core fear of ambivalent attachment then is abandonment. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, they truly believe they will be abandoned, whether that be in friendships or romantic relationship. They are waiting for that abandonment to happen because that is their core fear. So knowing this, one of the biggest issues that people who are ambivalently attached deal with is actually commitment. Because again, if you believe that you're not worthy of this, why would someone want to commit? It's like they can't comprehend it. And I know I struggle with this attachment style myself. And so there's this fear of, okay, if I commit, am I truly worthy of that? And if they're going to leave anyways, or if they're going to abandon me anyways, then why go through the commitment? Because you're waiting for that abandonment to happen. Or you just don't believe you're worthy of the commitment. And Justin, I know you had a couple different ideas on how the commitment part plays into it. And yours went a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah. And, ultimately it's the same issue. This commitment and abandonment, they play together. You got to think about it. Like if you were to sign up at a job and they said, hey, we're going to hire you for X amount of money, but we need you to sign a 5-year contract so that you commit to stay here and we can develop you. And, obviously it's fictional, but whatever. And think about that whole idea of now committing. There's no more back door. You're committed. People with ambivalent attachment style, they really want to go into a relationship feeling like there's some guarantee that they're not going to get hurt. And they want a backdoor escape route. And so a commitment, if you really commit to something, there isn't a back door to run out from if things get ugly. There isn't any of that. So that generates a lot of fear. But the big thing in there is consistency. People with ambivalence, one of their big issues is, this idea of how do we get here? They didn't have a consistent emotional home.
Nope.
So if you're not used to consistency, a commitment would lead to a lot of consistency. Think about a job. Your Monday to Friday for the next 5 years is going to look pretty darn similar.
Or marriage.
Yeah. But if you're not used to that, that's going to feel threatening because that's not what you grew up with. Remember, your attachment style comes from your primary caregivers, parents, grandparents, aunt, uncle, whoever raised you.
Yeah.
You garner that from them. So if you're not used to consistency, and remember, attachment style is a survival thing. I need to attach to you because at the end of the day, at 6 months old, I can't get a job. Okay, I can't go to Publix and work and get a paycheck and do things. Okay, I can't do that. So my attachment is literally survival. So consistency, if that is deemed unsafe and I start experiencing consistency, I'm going to have an internal reaction of feeling unsafe, even though logically we might go, wait a sec, isn't this a good thing? But our core is going, no, get out. Go to the back door, get out.
Yep.
So think about this, and how do we get here, right? And parents, this is where you can listen in using both ears, for yourself and your kids. Again, this isn't to bash anybody. This can come across in ways that, might be in some ways you can see as passive. One day you may be very attuned to your kid, meeting their needs and you're there for them. Tomorrow, you may be having a crappy day. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe you got a call you lost your job or just something not cool happened. And so you're not attuned to them and you don't meet the needs. Maybe they come to you saying, hey, I need your help. And you're like, not now. I can't deal with you. And then 2 days later, you're back to, hey, little buddy, do you want me to help you tie your shoe? Do you want me to help you with this? And the kid's getting these mixed messages of like, well, are you with me or are you not? Because the past 3 days I've gotten the messages. Now, I'll tell you from me, because at the end of the day, the child gets a memo early on that my parents may leave me. Now, my dad did this in a super overt manner when him and my mom used to get chippy. And it usually happened around dinner-ish time. He used to point at the door going, you can get out. You can leave whenever you want. There's the door. Get out of my house. This is my house. I've been going this whole rant. Get out. So think about it as a kid, 5, 6, 8, 12. Yeah. You're looking at it going, wow, if that's supposed to be his number one person that he's cool with, my mom, and he could say that to her in an instant, where does that leave me to stand? Now, that's a very intense, again, overt, in-your-face way that this come across. Again, it can be the subtle way that I talked about earlier. Yeah, and I just think, again, real quick, as far as us in therapy, one of the biggest things when you practice a relational theory, psychodynamic theory, the biggest element in the room is us as a tool and obviously the client. But we got to bring a very consistent presence because a lot of times this ambivalent nature leads to that kind of the addiction cycle too, where it's 0 to 100 miles an hour, not realizing that most of life is in a 45 mile an hour zone where we're just cruising. Now, that may feel boring and mundane, but remember the consistency thing. Consistency can be seen as threatening because we didn't get it. Anything we didn't get, even though we might logically say, wow, that's cool for me, it still registers down in your limbic, says threat.
I would say knowing that and talking about how that consistency now plays in as an adult is, what does this even look like to be ambivalently attached? How does this play into our relationships? What does this look like now? And Justin gave you guys a very detailed and a variety of ways that this can really happen before 3 and 4 years old. And so what does this look like now that you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s, or even 80s? How are you attaching to things? And I think it starts with those really ingrained internal messages of, I am not good enough, or something's wrong with me. And so what happens is we end up changing who we are, or we don't even know who we are. So this can turn into a lot of people pleasing. So for example, let's say you are dating someone and they ask you where you'd like to eat that night. And immediately it's just, oh, I don't care. It's nothing. But no, but really, where do you want to eat? Like, it's your birthday. We'll go wherever you want to go. And there's almost this inability to make the decision. And it's not because you don't know where you want to go, or because you don't know what food you definitely don't want that night. There's almost this fear involved where, okay, if I make a decision and I choose Carrabba's to go get dinner that night. Apparently you agree with that one. That was Beth's example earlier, so apparently we're doing Carrabba's. I want to go to Carrabba's tonight. Instead of saying that, it's like, oh no, it's whatever you want. Let's just go with you. Because it turns in that people-pleasing nature, so that way you are not abandoned. Because again, the core fear here is, something must be wrong with me. Childhood was not great. My needs were not met. So something must be wrong with me. And so just like my parents were not consistent, no one else will be either. So in relationships, we actually end up losing our voice. It's almost like your voice gets stripped away, and you just end up losing yourself in these relationships and doing whatever the other person wants. Now, this can also play into boundaries. I talk to a lot of couples who are trying to have certain physical or sexual boundaries, and there is a struggle there because they truly either, one, don't know what their own boundaries are or what they want, or two, aren't ready to really stand up and say, yes, this is what I want, and if you're going to leave me because of it, that's okay. Because they're waiting on that abandonment, that fear. Again, they don't believe they're good enough. They're searching for that love and acceptance. And so what other ways does this show? I have a nice little list for you guys here. Besides being a chameleon in our different relationships and at work, because I think that's a good way of having like a mental picture of how this works. It's almost like whatever group you move into throughout the day, or hanging out with different friends, showing up at different work environments, you kind of morph into whoever you need to be to gain that acceptance and to gain that love or that approval. In school, this can look like getting straight A's. And that first B that you get, or maybe even the one B that you get, it feels like an utter disaster.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my achievement and my success, or how well I did in school, was so tied to my worth that getting a B was just, I didn't know what to do. Because it seemed like something was wrong with me when I got that grade.
It's probably good we weren't friends in high school. I would have broke you free of that in a semester.
Well, that's how we became friends during grad school. See? We both graduated really well with our grades. So apparently you didn't break me free of that. But the approval part wasn't there. And there's so much more freedom when that approval isn't there, where you need to get 100 on every single assignment to feel like you're good enough. This also shows we are constantly seeking approval. So, for instance, before we do our show live, me and Justin usually exchange our ideas and things that we want to talk about and mention. And it would be like me doing this. Hey, Justin, so I had this really great idea. I feel like we should do this. Do you think this is okay? Is this good enough? I don't know. What do you think? Because we won't do it unless you want to do it. Are you sure it's okay? And it's that, I know this is like your biggest pet peeve. It's that constant need for reassurance. And I know we're laughing about it as we do it here, because I know that's his pet peeve and it's hysterical to watch him get all frustrated across the screen.
Wow.
But in But in reality, there is that panic. If I'm not good enough, this person will leave me. So I'm going to do whatever I possibly can to make sure they're happy, that their needs are met. So hopefully I will actually be able to be loved.
Mm.
And when that hits, you hear the sadness that's here. You hear the desperation that's there. And it's a little child that never knew they were loved for who they are. And now they're an adult looking for that love and that acceptance.
Yeah.
Whether it turns into someone, again, constantly asking for approval, whether it turns into not being able to make a decision that you want to make, whether it turns into accepting jobs at work that you really, one, don't know how to do, aren't part of your job description, don't really have time to do, but accepting them so that you feel like you're good enough. Because if you can achieve all this, hopefully your boss will like you. And it's that motivation there. It's that searching for love, searching for that acceptance, trying to feel good enough in some way. This can also look like in relationships. I know, Justin, this is going to kind of lead into yours, where a simple disagreement in a relationship or a difference of opinion, instead of it seeming like, well, I really want the walls to be painted blue, and you say you want them painted green. That simple difference of opinion for someone that's ambivalently attached will translate to, oh my gosh, he's going to leave. He's going to leave tonight. Or if he doesn't leave tonight, he'll leave by the end of the year. It's going to happen. This is just what happens. And that fear erupts, which literally transitions right into what you're going to talk about with relationships.
Yeah, we don't realize a lot that this becomes a pattern. We end up on a merry-go-round. We're at the carnival. We're at, one of the theme parks, Universal or something. We're on one ride, and we don't realize, wow, there's like 14 other rides I can go on, because we get stuck in this merry-go-round, this pattern. And where we don't realize is we get sucked into a self-sabotaging. And using Caitlin's point, it may sound very maybe minor and ridiculous, but the idea of, hey, I was thinking about painting this room blue. Really? I thought we said that was going to be green. Blue that doesn't make no sense. Mm-hmm. That may start sending off alarm bells going, oh no, this is it. This is the beginning of the end. Because it's these subtle things where we don't yet believe, and this gets into last week, so I'm not going to go far into this, but we don't yet believe that we're going to have a solid foundation to come back to land on. So if I have a disagreement with Andrea, I believe it's going to be fine. We'll end up working through and talking through. We're going to end up back here. It's okay. When you're ambivalent, you feel like you're in the movie 300 when that guy gets kicked into the black thing and falls. You're like, this is Sparta. Gets kicked. And the guy falls like this. Because when you're ambivalent, you don't necessarily have that foundation to come back to. Mm-hmm. So here's how this subtly plays out. And I feel like this is one of the more, quite honestly, wicked and hard spots with this style. And it comes out next week too with Avoidant, but it just manifests differently. But when you get this subtle, oh no, I don't know if this is going to work, they may leave, we actually end up typically self-sabotaging the relationship. We start nitpicking. We haven't talked about parts of self. That'll probably be part of our next series. But that critical parent comes out. We start nagging. We start chipping at them. We start probably pushing away a little bit. That's that push-pull we talked about.
Denying sex. Wanting to change up certain things with sex, knowing that it might not go over too well.
And that goes later into some of the parenting things. A cold shoulder. You start doing these things that give off a subtle message like, there's distance here. And eventually that person does go, this thing just ain't working. Mm-hmm. This just is not working anymore, and I'm done. And you go, see? I told you. We get our false confirmation. See, I knew it. I knew it. People are not trustworthy to stay. I knew it. Not realizing that we actually created that false confirmation because we're terrified of the long-term commitment, and we're terrified of the consistency. And we haven't yet experienced enough positive, constructive conversations. Again, it may sound ridiculous about the paint, but those are the arguments that happen in a marriage. Okay? I haven't yet had enough experiences to say, okay, we can disagree. We may get chippy with each other, but you know what? We're going to end up back here and it's going to be cool.
Yeah.
We haven't had that enough. So I don't believe this is going to weather the fire, weather the storm. So we start self-destructing it. And that's where some of the ownership comes in this journey of going, well, I respect the fact that you came to this attachment style very genuinely, and quite honestly, I think it's hard because we didn't have a choice as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like you were given a multiple choice going, secure, ambivalent, avoidant, disorganized. Let's try ambivalent.
Yeah, let's go with that one.
No, it was basically pressed upon us. We didn't have a choice. It was what we experienced, and that's what created our framework.
Yeah.
But now as an adult, there's an ownership part going, well, shoot. At the end of the day, all these relationships, I am a common denominator. I have been 50% of that relationship every time. A big part of this, too, is ambivalent people tend to look for a hero or a protector. And people who have ambivalent attachment style tend to want to get into relationships out of a bout of loneliness. Now, a lot of times the idea of alone and loneliness gets mashed together. They're two different things. Alone is literally when kind of like you're in the middle of the woods. You're alone. It's just you. Loneliness is that feeling where you're empty. You don't feel like you're connecting to anybody. You're at a party surrounded by people, but you still just feel this emptiness. And so what happens is we tend to seek out relationships to avoid that loneliness. Now, sometimes we get by with things like gaming, drugs, gambling, even sex at times. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, they fall short. At some point, it may be days, weeks, could be months, we get tired of the same video game or the whatever, weed, whatever, because we are wired as people to connect.
Yep.
Be with other people. And so we end up settling in a relationship that we don't necessarily want to be in, but we think it's better than being and feeling lonely.
Mm-hmm. So
where this can be a major setup is we tend to fall into a rescuer role because we're looking for, we look for a hero and a protector, but then we kind of fall into this interesting like, oh man, and it allows you to fall for, honestly, a narcissistic person really easy.
Mm-hmm.
Because they want to be, I will save you, I will rescue you.
Yep.
And it kind of sets you up in a lot of ways to get victimized.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where this does get more sad and harder. Now you're probably thinking, well, why the heck would I seek out a hero or a protector? That's kind of a weird thing to look for. It's because to remember back to the beginning of this show and our first show on this last week, we learned this all from our parents. So what if our parents were ambivalent? Guess what we're going to inherit? Ambivalence. Passed down. It's generational. So if our mom or dad or both, whoever, is struggling with anxiety, depression, and they're kind of very inconsistent how they attune to us as kids, a lot of times what happens is they don't have that sense of self. Like what Caitlin talked about, they don't have a sense of self developed because everything Caitlin said earlier applies to the parent if they're ambivalent. Mm-hmm. So what they start doing is confiding in the child. Yep. It parentifies the kid. The kid now becomes parent number 3. This becomes a very confusing thing we don't have time to get into. But the kid becomes parent number 3. And here's the message that goes on the back of the kid's mind. Well, I'm here for you, mom or dad. But who's here for me? And this is what generates this need for a hero or a protector, because we don't feel like we have one. Think about being a kid who's 10 years old and feels like they're naked and vulnerable out in the world because they're kind of being there for mom and dad instead of mom and dad being there for them. It's a scary place to be.
And Justin, real quick, what ties into exactly what you were saying too is for parents like what your dad did, where it's, hey, there's the door. You can leave whenever you want. If then you are looking for that rescuer or that protector because you also want to prove that you can be loved. Because that wasn't something that was shown to you as a kid. And not maybe you specifically, but just people that are ambivalently attached or struggle with this. When that consistency isn't there and they take that on themselves that something's wrong with me, part of looking for that rescuer, that protector is like, wow, someone can actually love me. And so they dive into relationships that maybe aren't the greatest to search for that assurance that they can actually be loved.
Mm-hmm.
And same cycle.
Yeah. And that's how I'm part of therapy. And some of you are like, all right, how do we heal this? That comes in week 4. When we talk about secure/earn secure attachment, we're going to get into how does this heal? How do we work through this? What's the therapy process like? So we're not getting into that today. Today is left for you to marinate on. If you are ambivalent, look some of this stuff up. There's plenty of articles on Google. There's a lot of information. Look up ambivalence. There's a ton of info you can learn. Also know that you can purchase these Phoenix Counseling shirts for $65.95 plus $30 shipping. Just kidding. I don't know if we're selling them yet, but I will ask the boss. But yeah, next week we're going to be talking about avoidant attachment style. And then the following week is disorganized. And then that last week is secure/earn secure attachment. Mm-hmm. So know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Earn secure attachment is where you want to go. Yep. Therapy is what allows you to get off the merry-go-round and realize, oh, there's 12 other rides here I can get on. Those of you who are my clients, you are at nauseum with my whole idea of the checkerboard and the game of checkers you've learned. Mm-hmm. And when someone comes along with the game of chess, you're like, no, that's weird. Get away from me.
Secure attachment.
Yeah. So people who might be more secure and consistent are playing chess. I'm not saying this is true, but it's just a different game that we've not been shown. So it feels unsafe.
Yep.
And yeah, I had something else I was going to say, but I forgot. So we're going to leave it at that.
That works.
And we ended before 30
minutes. That was the first time ever.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you. And that is it for episode 11 of the Justin
and Caitlin Show.
Yeah. Catch y'all next week.